Hi guys, it's Kelly here and I'm back with another video for you today. I'm going to be using some new products from Simon Says Stamp. This is their cherished release. It's got a lot of really good stuff in it. So I did show you the Twisted Borders die, but I didn't use it because this card didn't go as planned, which is basically the story of my life. So anyway, I got my mini Misty. I've pulled out some flowers and leaves from the Summer Flower set, which are amazing and I love them. And I'm just going to go ahead and stamp those down because I'm going to be fussy cutting them out. So I stamped them, and I stamped them twice in intense black ink from Simon Says Stamp. The reason I stamped them twice is because I hadn't used the stamps before, and I didn't do anything to prep them, so they needed to be stamped twice. And then you saw I just flipped it around and stamped it again, and then I was good to go start coloring. So really diving right into the Copics for this video. This card was supposed to be like a tealish blue watercolor background. And I thought with a tealish blue watercolor background, a bright yellowish orange flower would be beautiful because they're complementary colors. So that's how I picked the color scheme, but that's not what happened with the background. Anyway, for the petals on this particular flower, there's lots of layers, lots and lots and lots of layers. And that's awesome because it's going to give us lots and lots and lots of dimension. So some of the petals I'm coloring in completely with my lightest color. Those are the ones that are all the way in the back, all the way at the very bottom. The ones that are on top, meaning you can see almost all or almost all of the petal, I am leaving some white space on. So I'm doing flicks with just the tip of the marker from the base of the petal and also the tip of the petal. So flicking in towards the middle. For some of these flowers, working now with my second darkest color, some of them I'm still coloring in completely, the furthest ones away. Some of them I'm just adding a little bit of shading on. If it's directly behind another petal, I'm adding a little bit of shading, but the ones that are on top, the ones that you can see all or almost all of, I'm still leaving that white area. So I'm still doing the flicks from the base and from the tip, but leaving that white highlight. The white highlight in the center, especially on a very round flower like this one is, gives it the appearance of blooming outward, as if the center is deeper than the rest of the petals, and it's a great way to get a lot of really good dimension with not a whole lot of work, just by leaving that circle. And you can see just by looking here, there's a circle of white. For my third darkest color, I'm only adding just a flick or two to the petals that are on the top. For some of the ones on the bottom, like if it's just the tip like that one just was, that one got completely colored in. Other of them are just used for, like I said, those shading purposes. So where it would fall behind another petal, I'm adding just a little bit of dark. And especially at the base where a lot of times you can just see the bottom of another petal, that's getting colored in all dark too, and eventually it will be colored in with just my darkest color. But I'm just trying to build up these layers so that the ones that are on top are the lightest. Now you might be asking, if you want them to be the lightest, Kelly, why are you adding your third darkest color to it? The reason I'm adding my third darkest color to it is because I want them to be on top, but I also want them to have some dimension. I don't want them to look flat comparative to the rest of the flower. So they would still have their own shadows because we're looking for them to be rounded out from the center. For my darkest color, I'm adding none of this to the petals on top. Zero of the darkest color on the petals on top. The petals that are way in the back where it's just a tip or just the little sliver at the base of the petal, those are getting colored in completely. For most of them though, it's really just adding a line or two of shading where they're falling behind other petals. But you can see how we're really starting to get a ton of dimension because there are so much contrast there. And a lot of times people are afraid of darker colors. This darkest color for me on this flower is a YR04, which is actually a mid-tone. It's really a bright color. But because the other colors are so light and we are conserving that white highlight, it does a great job of giving that flower some depth while still allowing it to be really, really bright. So if you watch my videos, you know I go from lightest to darkest, darkest back out to lightest, and I'm just kind of blending. For the flowers or the petals that are on top, I'm using very little of the Y08 to blend. I'll use more of the Y13, which again was such a tiny amount because I wanted to use that white. Apparently my camera missed that, so I apologize. For the center of this flower, there is lots of little circle details around the edges, which is fantastic, and I love them. I gave them a once over with my lightest color, which is the E53, and then I'm just going to leave them alone. I'm going to concentrate all the other shading on the inside of the flower. So I'm coloring the edges of it with each individual color, and then with that same color, so like right now I'm working on the 57, I'm doing dots toward the inside. The reason I'm doing that, it's a technique called stippling, which I learned in art class a long time ago. I'm not going to tell you when. We're not going to date myself. I'm not going to go there. This is a happy video. But with that stippling, it can give you really great texture, which gives you the illusion of more seeds or bumpiness inside that flower. So then once that's done, I'm going to do the leaves. So these leaves are these flower sets that Simon has been releasing. I've loved every one of them. It started off with spring flowers, and then they had more spring flowers and winter flowers, and now these are summer flowers, and I have them all. I love them all. I love the flowers. But I wanted to do the leaves a little bit different, and I wanted them to look streaky or veiny. So I'm kind of adding in my own, and what makes this style of coloring really work is adding shadows from the center out, but then also one or two from the edges in. And but you got to leave that highlight in between. You hear me say all the time, conserve your highlight, conserve your highlight. Please conserve your highlight. You'll be much happier with your coloring, I promise. So then once that's blended out, I'm just going to show you on this little one the BGs that I used. For this one, I opted not to create the veins necessarily, but one of the things that I like to do is color one side darker than the other side when I'm doing leaves, and this is just a way to give them kind of good dimension. Leaves are sometimes a little bit difficult to make dimensional because there isn't a whole lot going on there, but using that flicking motion, you can add some depth to them. So this little hibiscus, I love this little hibiscus. This little hibiscus is going to get I just called it a high biscuit. I'm British. It's like high tea, a high biscuit. What? Anyway, this one we're going to color a little differently. I almost always start from lightest to darkest. You will see this here is not my lightest color. This is my darkest color because I wanted the edges to be white. And so I started with my darkest color, but I'm using a very, very light hand. You can see I'm using that same flicking motion. It's really easy to see when you're coloring with the darkest color. And I'm following the shape of the petal. So when you hear me say that, like you'll see how I'm turning the pen, or the marker, so that the streaks are not just straight up and down. The streaks follow the way that the petal is drawn. And the reason that is important is because if you don't do that, it's just going to look like you rubbed your pen from side to side instead of it looking like a three-dimensional object. So we are still working out to the lightest color, but because some of these petals are kind of bowed over and they're coming out from the center, you don't have a whole lot of real estate to work with. So I wanted to include all of the colors in there, but I'm having to be really, really conscientious about how far out I'm flicking since I wanted it to kind of fade into a white edge. When you're using RVs, an RV02 will severely bleach out your RV04, which as long as you know this, you can work with it. If you want a RV04 to be more true color, you just kind of have to go back in with it after you go over the RV02. In this particular case, because I want it to blend out into white, it actually totally works to my advantage because it's going to bleach out a lot of those, the 04 in case I got too tall with it. So I did go back in and add a little bit of dark, putting all those light colors over my darker color kind of bleached it out a little. And I'm just going to go back in with a C1, and where there's kind of ripples or bends in the flower, I'm just going to add in a little bit of shading. And this is just so the edges don't look flat when they fade out into white when we have all this other dimension going on in the flower. For the center, I used the same Ys and YRs I did for the bigger sunflower type bloom. This just gives it some continuity throughout the card. Just made it a little bit darker at the base. This petal flips up, and I didn't feel like I had enough shading, so I just added a little bit more there. You can see off to the right hand side, I did stamp out a few more leaves because I really had no idea what I was doing when I started this. I had no idea what my flower arrangement was going to look like. And then as I colored, I got a much better idea in my head. When I'm fussy cutting things, I like to cut them down into smaller things. That's what you saw me doing there. They're just easier to handle. So I fussy cut everything out. I'm using a Memento Tuxedo black marker to blacken the edges. This just gives it a more finished appearance. You don't want to use an alcohol marker to use this. You want to use a water-based marker to do this, because if you use an alcohol marker, it's going to bleed into your image and everybody will be sad. So I'm going to use some Broken China Distress Oxide ink to do my background. You might notice when I put my stencil down that it's got some greens and yellows and blues and all kinds of who's it's and what's it's going on. That's because I tried to make this background like 4 times, yo. Like, I'm not even kidding you. I would have shown you my boo-boos if I was able to salvage any of them into something that I even kind of liked, but I didn't. Everybody makes mistakes, I make mistakes, and sometimes when you're winging it with a card, when you don't have a game plan going in, which I clearly did not with this one, and let's be honest, I clearly do not in my regular life, you're going to have things that you don't like, and it just didn't flow with the brightness of the card, and I didn't like it. So here I just did a very washed out layer of the Distress Oxide, the Broken China, and then I put the stencil over and went in with a heavier layer. The blooms mostly cover this up. It's more just like an accent, and I was much, much happier with that. So I have everything kind of laid out here, and this is how I kind of like to adhere my leaves when I have a flower arrangement that I'm putting together. For this particular one, the leaves are going to be flat and the flowers are going to be popped up. So I don't want to stamp my sentiment over the popped up images. If it's too close to the items that are popped up, it'll skip. So I want to get my leaves glued down so I have a guideline of where my sentiment should go, but I'm not going to adhere my flowers yet. I'm using the new, this is also from the same Cherished release set, called Thoughtful Messages. I love this. There's so many good ones in there. I just love a stamp set that you know you're like, yep, I'll use this 100 times. So I wanted to stagger my sentiment. If you watch my channel, you know I do this a lot. I just used a regular Post-it note. I mask off the part that I don't want to ink up, and then when I'm done with that, I clean it really, really good, and then I flip it over and mask the other part. Just make sure when you're doing that, you're moving the Post-it note, because if it gets saturated in one area, it can get on the stamp underneath, and then it'll be ruined no matter how good you cleaned it. I'm using Scotch foam tape to go ahead and pop up these little flowers. I'm not putting a ton of tape on there because I want to be able to slide the pink hibiscus underneath the sunflower, and if I have a ton of tape on there, like all the way up to the edge, I won't be able to slide it underneath it. This one I kind of fidgeted with just a little bit. I wasn't really sure. I didn't take a photo or anything. I probably should have. But so I just kept kind of rearranging it until I was happy with it. I finally got there, thank God. And then this I'm just going to do a little bit of detail work. I did neglect to mention, before I cut out my images, I did outline them with my EK Success writing pen because I prefer a bold black outline. Then this is, I went in with my white gel pen and just kind of highlighted those areas, those little circle areas in the center of the flower, and then I just added some clear Wink Stella, and I called it a day. So yeah, I hope you learned something and enjoyed your time, and I will catch you guys on the next video. Bye.